I've never really given it much thought, but I've been thinking about what it's been like to have come from mixed race parentage. I've only ever seen it as a positive, but being that I'm maybe older than most mixed race kids these days, being in my mid-50s, I thought I might share some of my thoughts about that with you. Here are my 3 greatest things for having come from a multicultural background. Number 1, multi-language exposure. Now we know that kids pick up language like a sponge, but back when I was growing up, my parents were told not to confuse the situation for us, so my brother and I were never taught Dutch, which I really regret. We were also not formally taught Japanese, so the Japanese that I've retained or learned along the way has happened by default, and just because we lived there when I was as young as I was. The Japanese that I do know came from having been around it by exposure and not for having formally learned it. Because I was in Japan from the ages of 2 to 6, I just soaked up some stuff, and then we were around Japanese people pretty regularly. I heard my dad speak it on the phone. Number 2 would be a broader awareness of the world at large. I'm grateful to know that there are people in other countries that do things differently than I do, and if you don't have exposure to that sort of thing, I think that it's very easy in whatever country you live in to think that this is just your entire world. Everything you know and see is all there is to the world and to life, and that's, as you know, simply not true. So I'm very grateful to have been exposed to that from an early age. Number 3 on my list would be that I feel like I have a greater sense of compassion and relatability to those who may be seen as different. Because I grew up in Japan from an early age, that was all I had any recollection of. Coming to the United States then and having to interact with other people from different cultures, I feel like I was more conditioned to be more accepting of that and more comfortable. And I'm really, really grateful for that, because so many, I feel like, don't have that privilege. And finally, my one con that came to mind, but it's a big one, would be that of communication style, which translates into pretty much everything. So we're talking about everything from comfort level with displays of affection or methods of expression of affection, and also things like finances or just what's considered appropriate and what's not. It's bad enough, I think, even within the same culture, to have different communication styles just based on the upbringing that we had in our own individual homes. So that alone is challenging. And then add to that communication style, So when you're bringing kids into this world, or as you're raising your multicultural children, I hope that this will help you have some awareness of how these dynamics might impact them as they grow up. Let's discuss this more in the comments. Thank you for watching.